Get to know local leaders, catch community updates, and hear about the latest happenings from City Hall and beyond on City Notes, an informative and hyperlocal interview series brought to you by the City of Nicholasville. I'm here today with Paul Bradford, our GIS, which stands for Geographic Information System, Floodplain Administrator. Paul, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Can you share a bit about your background and what about it led you to this role?
Oh, sure. I am not a native of Nicholasville, but I'm a resident now and a longtime job holder in Nicholasville. I'm from northeastern Kentucky, the Ashland area. I graduated from Marshall University in Huntington, West Virginia. The intent when I went into the geography program was to ultimately go into urban planning. When I found this opportunity in Nicholasville, be the GIS administrator at the time, that was pretty much my full-time role. I was in the beginning strictly mapping, and it has evolved since then.
Now, I know that flooding continues to rank as the most common and costly natural disaster in the country, so I can imagine floodplains are pretty important. But first things first, can you explain what a floodplain is, how they impact residents?
Sure. The term floodplain can be used a few different ways. Some people use it loosely. So to be clear and what I deal with, I'm strictly looking at the FEMA floodplain. They technically changed the terminology of what used to be called a FEMA floodplain to be an SFHA, which is a special flood hazard area. So FEMA floodplain or special flood hazard area, a lot of people have heard of the 100-year flood. That is the same thing. What is mapped out on the flood insurance rate maps put out by FEMA. So I am tasked with running the National Flood Insurance Program that the city has chosen to participate in for a number of years, as do many communities, because the benefits are so great. By doing that, we get access to government subsidized flood insurance for our residents. And a lot of people don't realize that insurance is not just for people in the floodplain. Anybody can have access to that insurance. It's a big misnomer that only people in the floodplain can have access to the insurance. And actually, chances are it'll be a lot more affordable. Flooding happens beyond just the floodplain. So it's a great benefit for the whole community to have access to it. It's mandatory for most residents in the FEMA floodplain, as our participation in the program mandates. It's one of the things that FEMA says we have to do. The ultimate goal is to protect loss of life and destruction of property. Administering the program, and also different actions to mitigate future flooding. And there's also the response, if God forbid there was a disaster, that the floodplain administrator would have to inventory and be ready to take on the results. It can be pretty involved. It's ultimately the benefits to the citizens are pretty great.
Your role is part of the city's Planning and Zoning Department, which, alongside other responsibilities, oversees infrastructure development, the enforcement of zoning, building codes, and of course, floodplains. Can you tell us more about the department and your role in the community?
It's broad, honestly. Everything from a major residential or commercial development will start with us, even something as small as getting a permit for a storage building or deck. It's a broad list of things that we handle in terms of development. Planning and zoning we are basically staff that works in conjunction with two boards, the Planning Commission and the Board of Adjustment. We also dictate that we have subdivision regulations and zoning ordinances. And there are certain things that we are required to have and mandate in those regulations, and there's also a lot of broad discretion on how we develop those regulations. In my role, GIS and floodplain, I was fortunate enough 10, 12 years into the role, get to expand that role, and I embrace that because urban planning is what essentially drove me into the field. So I've been fortunate enough to handle two different censuses and work as the census liaison and reporting back, and which was pretty cool. Getting back, being the liaison that essentially helps develop an accurate official number every 10 years for your community. I handle all the construction financial guarantees for infrastructure. That was a new area for me. I've enjoyed doing that. I got to be a part of the last comprehensive plan that was formulated in 2017. That was a great experience. My role's a little all over the place, which I love because mapping touches on so many different aspects of planning that it opened me up to a little experience in different roles.
I understand you mapped out the entire city. Can you talk about that process? Why you took this on, how you did it?
Sure. Essentially, that was the main focus in the beginning of job here, and it has since evolved. But Nicholasville adopted GIS fairly early in the game for a town our size. There was a lot more to be done, and I came in at a time when the early 2000s, it was crazy. I mean, crazy in a good way, but development was off the charts. I think at the time, at one point, we were third fastest growing city in the state. If that tells you anything. So I came in at a time where GIS was still being developed in its infancy. The mapping needed work and needed to be not only further revised, but be kept up with, which was a challenge. Any subdivision plat that came in, we want survey accurate information in the GIS database. Mapping serves different different departments, different organizations in different ways, and a lot of places don't need accurate property lines. In planning and zoning, it matters. When I would assist a customer that needs to look at property lines on their aerial photo, it matters what I pull up. So getting survey data in manually in the beginning was a lot of work. So integrate survey data that we get from plats into the GIS mapping, attaching data to your different elements of the map. I mean, it's not just parcels, and it goes beyond planning and zoning. Had the opportunity to work with the police department, the fire department to help them. That's been real enjoyable too, to get to do different things and see, their response areas, help modify, help them function more effectively. So it's really evolved since I started and come a long way. It's always a work in progress, I feel like. A lot of people will look at a map and not realize how much work goes into some of the small details. In the long run, like I said, it matters when somebody comes in, whether you have an accurate property line or a close to accurate. I mean, I'm not a surveyor, so I'm not going to guarantee 100% accuracy, but we need to know where they can place a storage building. And that's a smaller thing, but it comes into play too in a much broader sense with larger developments. Analyzing the data, getting information statistically once you have it in the system can really benefit how you plan the future growth. So that's a really cool part of it too.
Right. The impacts of this and how many different facets of life it touches are more far-reaching than I even realized. So, Paul, what is a Nicholasville person, place, or thing that has been an influence in your life lately?
This is probably gonna sound a little cheesy. I'm gonna say I'm finally a proud homeowner. It took me a while to finally go that route, and so I am ingrained not only here with my career, but as a resident, which is really cool. The work relationship with Nicholasville and working for the city, I'm very ingrained in day-to-day life, but to actually be a resident here, a homeowner, is a whole other thing, so it's cool. But one of my personal passions and interests is historic architecture. I was fortunate enough to find a house that had a lot of the characteristics of something I wanted to own, something that I may not have had the opportunity in other areas or other regions, or a lot of research and try to find out the history before me of my house, and I do that with other buildings too, just a personal interest. And I've done a lot of just personal research on Jessamine County history and Jessamine County building and architecture. But I would say my house has inspired me in that sense, given me even more passion for the preservation of history.
That's fantastic. Congratulations on becoming a homeowner, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Great. It was great talking to you. Thanks for having me.